coming up on episode 34 of Creative Writing.
As entrepreneurs, we need to amplify our strengths, and we just need to really honestly ignore or hire for our weaknesses.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost like...
How boring would it be to be a finished product? I am hearing unique stories every single time I interview somebody, and that just gets me fired up.
Hello and welcome to episode 34 of Creative Writing, the podcast for writers and bloggers, all about building authentic platform that doesn't leave you feeling smarmy. Okay, episode 34. You guys, I'm talking today to John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire, and we had a really fun conversation. I've actually met John in person last year at Podcast Movement. I was sitting in the hallway being a antisocial introvert that I sometimes am, drinking coffee, 2 cups, because this is the key at conferences. You never know when they're going to take the coffee away, so you get a cup for each hand. Just freebie for you right there. But I had 2 cups of coffee sitting in the floor, kind of writing in a journal, notes or questions. And I hear this voice that I'm used to hearing because, I listen to his podcast. And I look up and I had sat down in the floor, right across from the table where he is sitting under the Podcaster's Paradise cruise table. And so, of course, I'm an introvert, but I'm not shy. So I ran over and got a picture with John, but we did have a really lovely conversation. We've emailed back and forth every so often because I'm one of those people that replies to emails when I get an email from somebody. And so we've had some conversations back and forth. So I can tell you when we talk about email and I say that he responds when people respond to his emails, he does. And you guys know I've talked with Paul Jarvis and other people about that. That's one of my favorite things to do as a person who gets emails to reply, and also as a person who does email. So that's one of the things we talk about is how to handle email, how he has such a large community and still stays kind of in touch with them, that it seems more intimate than just, thousands of people. Because here's who John is, and you probably know him, but just in case you are not listening to podcasts or you are not in the entrepreneurial world, I can't say that word, entrepreneurial. So if you don't know John hosts Entrepreneur on Fire. It's a 7-day-a-week podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. There's that word again. I can't escape it or say it. He is insane. He is a monster in the best way possible. So I have a lot of respect for him, and I had to interview him because when I decided last year that I was going to launch a podcast and I was researching, okay, I have 2 weeks to start a podcast because I had someone who wanted to interview and they had a time crunch and I was thinking about starting a podcast and I thought, can I start a podcast in 2 weeks? And I found John's free podcast course, which I will highly recommend. And it's freepodcastcourse.com. And I found out, I absolutely can start a podcast in 2 weeks, totally. And so I went through all of his training and that was really instrumental in getting this podcast started. So thank you, John, for that. And I really, wouldn't be here recording. I wouldn't have interviewed you, clearly, had I not gotten the podcast off the ground thanks to the free podcast course. So John is fantastic for learning all kinds of things. And even if you don't consider yourself an entrepreneur, he has so many different kinds of guests in different kinds of fields that there is something for everyone to learn. And so I love to pop in. I don't listen to every single day's shows, but I do listen to a lot of them, especially I found that even people kind of in a different field than me, I learn a lot of things from his podcast. And I've also learned a lot just from watching the way he treats people, seeing how he handles his business and the way that he interacts with people. A few little notes. I have to say, again, I mentioned this a few episodes back. This is the first time and hopefully the last time where I did not hit record when we started the interview. And John only has 25 minutes for these interviews because he records, as I said, 7-day-a-week podcast. He has interviews constantly. And normally I have a few minutes before the technical recording of the episodes where I talk to people and we kind of get warmed up a little bit because sometimes you need that so you can have a good back and forth going. But with John, it was 25 minutes. You don't have time for that. So we dove right in, which meant I forgot to hit record. So here's a little clip of me telling him that I forgot to hit record.
Listeners will get burnt out. You'll run out of guests. And I hate to say it, Jamie Tardy, but you were dead wrong. Here we are, 1,200 episodes later. I get over 50 inbound requests per week to be on EOFire.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? I have to start over because I didn't press record.
It happens to the best of us.
And I leave that in to show just John's graciousness with me. Doing this on the podcast, interviewing like a top podcaster, like the top podcaster, and I'm just going to forget to hit record. That's fine. But also because I mention later in the interview, I reference what he was talking about with his mentor and coach, Jamie Tardy, telling him not to launch a 7-day-a-week podcast. And I loved hearing that because sometimes in your business, with your blog, with your writing, you know you need to do something, even if it defies logic. And sometimes you need to do it, no matter what. And sometimes it fails and it's a big flop. And that's okay too, because then that becomes part of your story. And if you ever go an entrepreneur on fire, as you hear John say, you will have to share that story of that disaster. So another note is I'm not used to, I think, talking to people who are as comfortable, as he was. And so there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of laughter. And apparently he thinks I look like Taylor Swift. I don't know that I do. I don't know that you guys would agree, but I will take it. Without further ado, my interview with John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire. John, it's so great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Excited to be here, Kirsten.
Well, I want to dive in and ask you, how in the world do you run a 7-day-a-week show? What does it take for you to have systems in place to run that? Because that's insane.
When I had my aha moment back in 2012, I was just like, there needs to be a 7-day-a-week podcast in this world. And I want to be the person that produces that podcast. The next thing I did was hire a mentor. And the next thing that mentor said was, John, you are crazy. There's a reason why there isn't a 7-day-a-week podcast. You're going to get burnt out. Your listeners are going to get burnt out. You're going to run out of guests. Well, I love my dear first mentor and now dear friend, Jamie Tardy, but she was wrong. And here we are 1,200 episodes later, over 1 million listens per month, Fire Nation growing every single month, rocking and rolling. And the one reason where she was really wrong and she was concerned was that, John, all you're going to be doing is interviewing all you're going to be doing is interviewing guests on your podcast. If you do a 7-day-a-week show, you're not going to have time to build a viable business, which I got. But then I realized, you know what? I can actually set it up where if I batch and use that phrase batching so purposefully, because batching was so key for my success. If I batch my interviews 1 day a week and I just do an interview every hour on the hour, starting at 9 a.m., ending at 5 p.m., I will have all 8 interviews for the week done for that one little bonus and extra little buffer there by the end of the day. And guess what? It is a lot of work and it is a long day and it is tough. All of those things, yes. But guess what? When I wake up in the morning, I know that when I go to bed that night, 8 interviews will be complete. And so I make it happen. And it allows me the other 6 days a week to work on other parts of my business to turn EOFire into a thriving business. So it's all about batching. That's how I successfully do a 7-day-a-week podcast. Kirsten.
That is so crazy. I know that batching works, and I've done that with, images and blog posts and different things. And a lot of people talk about that, but it's still, I think if you're not batching your work, you've just got to start because that is so key. And, I wonder, this is just like a side note. Are you an introvert or extrovert?
Extrovert.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm an introvert and I love, love, love interviews like this where I get to talk to people. But if I had to do 1 day of interviewing people all day, I think at the end of the day, I might die. Or I would take the other 6 days to recover and not speak. So
you would think so. And here's why you're wrong. So just like if tomorrow, and you're not a jogger or a runner, I said, Kirsten, go run 26.2 miles. You would die the rest of the week with soreness and with being all, I couldn't run 26.2 miles right now and be able to walk the rest of the week. It would absolutely destroy me. You got to build up to it. I started doing 2 interviews a day, and then I built up to 3 and then 4, and you build up your stamina for these interviews just like you build up in running. And another kind of analogy that I do love that I think works here is people are like, John, but 8 interviews in a day? And this is where I'm like, guys, why are you focusing on the interviews? Focus on the end result. Because just like when you're running that marathon, for anybody that's run a marathon, you know this. I've actually only run half marathons, but I still know this is true. When you're running that, as long as you keep saying to yourself, tonight I will be in my bed. Tonight I will be, it just gives you hey, no matter what I'm doing right now, I'm going to be in my bed tonight. And that's a good place to be. And that's my attitude with these episodes. It's hey, I'm going to go to bed tonight either way, either having done 8 interviews or having done 4 or 2 or 0. But guess what? I choose 8. And guess what? 8 get done.
That's really neat. Well, that is true. I guess, building up, I still think as an introvert, I just wouldn't ever plan to do that. I could batch some other stuff. Interviews, I don't know. I need more recovery time.
Well, I think this brings up an important point though, too, is as entrepreneurs, we need to amplify our strengths and we just need to really honestly ignore or hire for our weaknesses. I don't work to get my weaknesses better. I don't say, hey, I'm crappy at that. I'm going to get okay at that. Who wants to be okay at that? That doesn't mean anything in this world. I look at what I'm really good at and I try to become great at it. So if you know yourself, Kirsten, and you're an introvert, then go with that and know where your strengths are and focus on those.
And I think that even brings up an important point too, because like you said with your mentorship with Jamie Tardy, she said, don't do it. And you were like, no, this is the thing. This is the thing. And so I think, I've been really sick lately of all the kind of formulas for everything. Like, here's the formula to have a bestseller. Here's the formula to have your this and that work. Well, okay, take the formula that worked for somebody else and then think about how it would work for you. And I think that's the key, because these formulas don't just work for every single person and situation. So, you clearly saw that and you saw through, I know Jamie gave you great advice. And then that one piece was like, okay, this is the one we're going to go ahead and say no to, and we're going to make it work because you knew what you wanted to do. So clearly, you are fired up and excited about what you do. In every interview of yours, you ask if people are ready to ignite. What keeps you fired up when you're doing, so many of the same things over and over again? What keeps you excited about your work?
What got me excited about launching Entrepreneur on Fire is the same thing that keeps me fired up today, 1,200 episodes later with Entrepreneur on Fire. I love hearing stories from successful and inspiring entrepreneurs. I love it. It's something that I really enjoy. I get a kick out of hearing the worst moments of the guests that I'm interviewing. And guess what? I've never had a guest that's had the exact same worst moment. In fact, I've never even had a guest that's had close to the same worst moment as another guest, because we all have completely unique individual stories, lives, experiences. And that's what I force my guests. And even if they don't want to tell that story, I force them. I say, hey, I don't want to hear that you want to fail faster and fail forward. We've all heard those catch lines. I want to hear your worst moment. Take me there. And hearing that story is fascinating to me, just like I love hearing the aha moment and the light bulb that went on at some point in their journey and how they turned that to success. So I am hearing unique stories every single time I interview somebody, and that just gets me fired up.
I think, prepare people, if you're listening and you ever want to go on John's podcast, you've got to be willing to share that failure moment, no holds barred. And I love that because story it's what we're interested in. It's why there are so many reality shows still all these years later. It's why we have, live streaming, I think is so important. We all want to kind of see a glimpse into somebody's life, the good, the bad, the ugly. And, that really helps encourage people. So I can totally understand that. And I always feel inspired listening to your podcast because, even if it's somebody in a totally different niche than what I'm in a totally different business, and I'm not even sure I fully consider myself an entrepreneur, but I still like listening to it because you hear the stories and you hear the struggle and then how people kind of worked through it. And usually, I don't feel like people come on and act like they're a finished product. They're always talking about what their next thing is, the next goal. And so I think we have so much to learn from each other, which is important.
How boring would it be to be a finished product? Come on.
I don't know.
Where's the fun in that?
I always have to have new projects, which is why I think, I wondered for you what that was like. And not that you don't have new projects, and I want to actually talk about your newest project in a minute, but just having to do the interviews. But I think for me, I would find the same thing, that each story being different would get me, excited and fired up. So yeah. Well, speaking of fired up, you call your people Fire Nation. You have a thriving community, even though it's so large. So, as someone who's really interested in building community and authentic audience building, what is it like to try to forge those more personal relationships with such a giant audience?
Well, number one, the focus for every entrepreneur needs to be to create free, valuable, and consistent content. If you're doing those three things, you will build an audience, period. And now the reason why you want to engage with that audience, and this is getting into really the meat and potatoes of your question, Kirsten, is you want to ask the question, what are you struggling with? So when they email you, when they tweet, Facebook message, wherever it might be that they're connecting with you, you want to connect right back with them and say, like, oh, thank you so much for your kind words or for your constructive criticism or whatever it might be. Thank you for just engaging with me. Now, let me just ask you this question, since, you've obviously reached out to me. What are you struggling with? You ask them that question, and then they're going to come back to you with their pain points or obstacles or challenges. And then you the podcaster or the producer of content that they reached out to. You're going to create the solution to those problems in the form of a product, a service, a community. So engaging is critical. I engage with some section of Fire Nation every single day. I personally respond to every single email that comes to my inbox. And I love and treasure and value that engagement because it gives me the ideas and the aha moments to launch the product, services, and communities that you see are a suite of products within EOFire.
And I know that's true because I've emailed you back from some of your emails and had you respond. And so that's such a genuine, great way to connect with your audience. And I kind of always tell my people, like, until I'm Taylor Swift, I'm going to respond to your emails. And so
you kind of look like Taylor Swift.
Do I? I think, I never will be Taylor Swift. And even if I had, a much larger audience, I would hope that I could always do that because there's nothing worse than when you hit reply to an email like that and you get one of those canned responses, or every now and then you'll get like the assistant. Although I appreciate when the assistant says like, I'm the assistant, but I'll pass it on, rather than trying to kind of hide it and make it sound like, just this automated response. Because you don't feel like a person when someone sends you an automated response, right? You feel like you're just a number to them. So I love that you take that time because I know that is time consuming to respond to emails. Bring up email. That's one of my main excitements. I love talking about email lists and getting nerdy about email lists. But what for you do you feel like are the important platforms? You've got a podcast. I mean, you have everything. You're everywhere. But what have been kind of the big platforms for you in terms of your growth and connecting with audience?
Well, I'm with you with emails and building your email list. I mean, that is a phenomenal and potentially really the best, at least tied for first, best way to connect with your audience. These are people that have raised their hands that are saying, hey, I've subscribed to your newsletter, or I've, opted in for a great giveaway that you're giving, some PDF, some ebook, or whatever it might be. I've given you my email address. I've given you permission to email me, and I can take away that permission at any point with a simple click of the button and unsubscribe. But until I do that, like, hey, you can reach into my inbox and deliver a message. And I really value that. And I'll be honest, like, I am that person that's saying, hey, I'm going to deliver a lot of content. And it's not for everybody. And if it's not for you, either A, don't read my emails or unsubscribe. That's kind of my attitude. Like, people say, John, if you just emailed less, I stay in your list. And I'm like, well, go find a list that emails you less. Like, that's simple enough. Or just pick and choose the ones that you want to read when you want to read it. I don't see why you have to open every single email that I send you. There's a pretty easy click and archive button in the Gmail that allows you to do things pretty quickly. So you need to be yourself. You need to speak to your audience consistently. I think email is a great way to do it. Something that I've recently become obsessed with, and that's kind of a strong word, obsessed, but I've really become interested in, is probably a better way to put it, is Snapchat. It was a platform that I did not get for a really long time. Really up until 3 weeks ago. Gary Vaynerchuk has just been pounding the table for it. I finally downloaded it. I finally checked it out. I was confused as all get up for 3 days. I couldn't figure anything out about it. I just didn't get Snapchat. Then just like a light switch went on in a room, the light bulb went on for that. I get it. I see the value, and now I'm Snapchatting daily.
That's great. I keep hearing the same thing, and absolutely had the same experience. I got the app on my phone. I opened it, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what is happening here. So maybe
what's weird is kind of like a rite of passage, Kirsten, I'm telling you, because now that I know my way around Snapchat, I'm actually proud of how difficult it is to get to know it, because I'm like, anybody can go on stupid little Instagram and just press a button and post, and we all get it. And it's like your grandmother's doing it. Well, Snapchat is tough. It's like a different language. And so when you know that language, you're part of a crew, you're part of a group. And that's kind of special. It sounds dorky a little bit, but it's true.
No, it doesn't sound dorky, but I do wonder if there are any teenagers listening, if they are just like laughing their heads off right now, because this started as like a, platform for much younger people. And so I just wonder, like, I don't think I have a great audience in the teen department, but if they're listening and they're like, oh man, these old people cannot figure out Snapchat. But yes.
And I am.
No,
old,
I think you're probably younger than me. I don't know. We don't have to talk age. We don't have to disclose.
I am 36
I am
years
older. I
old.
just turned 38, which is it's okay. Wow. It's fine. It's going to be okay. But
well, you look like a 27-year-old brunette Taylor Swift.
Awesome. I will take that. That is amazing. The compliment. Hey, that's the compliment of the year so far, because it's 2016. We're new. Boom.
Let's keep. That's going to be hard.
It is. I'll tell my husband, and then he'll be like thinking of something. So he'll be like, "That's not fair. It's got to come from me. It's got to come from me." So we'll work on that. Well, okay. So I know the primary focus is your podcast, and that's sort of the central hub for your business and the things that you do. But you also do a lot of writing, like we talked email, and I've been on your list, I don't know, maybe a couple years now, and you've been sending out a lot of things lately because you're launching the Freedom Journal, which I want to talk about. But I want to ask, before we get to the Freedom Journal, what has been kind of hard for you, or what have you worked through to kind of work on your writing? Because I know you've talked about that before on your show, that was something you kind of put some effort into, because that wasn't maybe the first thing that you were drawn to or felt like you were gifted at. But I know you do a great job. I mean, your emails are very readable and they're very engaging. So what has that process been like for you working on your writing?
So this is one thing that I think will really resonate with the listeners, and this really works for every facet of your life. I'm talking business, health, relationships. If you want to be, do. It's really that simple, my friends. I wanted to be a podcaster. I had to flippin' podcast. There was no other way for me to become a podcaster. As much as I would have wanted to just magically snap my fingers, become a podcaster, it was episode 400 or 500 before I actually felt super comfortable behind the mic. It took me podcasting for almost 2 years. So if you want to become a writer, write. I was not good at sending out emails when I first started. I'm actually interested to go back and look at the first few emails I sent back in 2012. I'm sure they were miserable, but I continued to do it. I got a little bit better every single time. And now here I am, able to sit down and whip out, really, all humility aside, a pretty impactful email in about 20 minutes. I just sit down, I just let stream of consciousness go. And that has come from me consistently doing that thing, being really bad when I started, being okay a couple years later, being kind of good, and then continuing to improve a little bit every single time.
And I think people find their voice as well. Like you said, it's a lot easier now. Once you kind of get the nuts and bolts of writing and you get used to it and you feel confident in your voice, I think you can sit down and do it much quicker because you know yourself, that writing voice. And also, I love, I'm a blogger. I've been blogging for 11 years, and the blog posts to me that I plan aren't always, I'm like, this is going to be one that's going to go crazy. And then it doesn't. And the one that I hammer out in like 20 minutes because I feel really passionate about something.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that go viral and get all this attention. I'm like, it's about the passion, So once I know my voice, I know how I want to write, and kind of letting that passion stir the words. And you've been very passionate recently about your latest project. So I would love to take some time to hear, like, what is the Freedom Journal? How have you been launching it? I want to know everything. Tell me all about the Freedom Journal.
So Kirsten, with 1,200 interviews under my belt, I have a lot of people reach out and say, John, like, what is the secret to success of successful entrepreneurs? Because you've now interviewed over 1,200 of them. Like, you must know what that secret sauce is. And my answer was always, well, it's hard work. But I never loved that answer. I always wanted to give more. So I took another step back and I said, what is a commonality of all these entrepreneurs? And it became so obvious, Kirsten, that they knew how to set and accomplish goals where struggling entrepreneurs struggle with that very thing. So I wanted to create the definitive solution for that. I wanted to bridge that gap, and I wanted to do it in a really meaningful way, not just some app or a PDF or something that's in the cloud. So I decided to create a beautiful leather-bound, gold-embossed journal, which you could be proud to hold, excited to see, show off to your friends, your family, your loved ones. And the result of a year of work is the Freedom Journal. Accomplish your number one goal in 100 days. It's a very specific journal for a very specific purpose. Knock over that really big domino in your life. And once that happens, you can start this chain reaction of awesome. Because think about me, Kirsten. If I hadn't launched EOFire, that really big domino, nothing that's happened of success would have happened. That was my one big domino. So what's that one big domino in your life? And the Freedom Journal will teach you how to set that big domino as a SMART goal: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, 5 attributes. And then it will guide you in the accomplishment of that goal in 100 days. And that's going to happen through daily tasks, nightly recaps, 10-day sprints, quarterly reviews, meaning every 25 days you look back to see how far you've come. Those 10-day sprints are micro goals, keeping you on track, building momentum, getting you 10% close to your goal. So the Freedom Journal is now live. I launched it January 4th via Kickstarter. And until February 5th, it's going to be live on Kickstarter, where we're offering some really cool bonuses and gifts and add-ons and all this great stuff that's going on with the Freedom Journal. So I would definitely say, hey, if anything that I've just said sounds interesting, if you think that you might have a goal in your life that you want to accomplish, visit thefreedomjournal.com. Check out our Kickstarter campaign. If it's after February 5th, visit thefreedomjournal.com. It'll be a great website where you can purchase your copy of the Freedom Journal and you'll be off to the races.
Well, I thought of this really weird analogy when you were talking, and I don't know if this will make sense fully, but as you were describing it, I kind of thought that in some ways it's sort of like a landing page for your life. You know, and you think of landing pages, they're supposed to be super focused. There's one goal. And once they accomplish that goal, like it has that one thing for you to do. And that's kind of like what it sounds like you're describing. Like, okay, everybody stop doing all the things. Let's get that one thing taken care of. That's the big thing. And that's going to help other things fall into place. So weird analogy. Not sure if that fully works, but that's kind of what came to mind, was like a landing page for your own life.
I love the phrase, a landing page for your life. I think that's powerful. I'm not one of those people that's just going to be like immediately, oh my God, Kirsten, that's perfect. But what I am going to say is, I'm going to think about it and I'll get back to you, because I love the phrase, a landing page.
Well,
for
and
your
I
life.
haven't gone through it yet. So you have in the creation, and I'm sure, like, did you test it out? I mean, is this something that worked for you, and that's kind of how you came about building it?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm now on the third iteration. So I'm on day 17 of my next big goal. Because, hey, this is something we have to do in different facets of our life. I had a business goal. Then I had a life goal, and now I have a fitness goal. It's actually a health and fitness goal. And my goal is to get down to 160 pounds and 11% body fat. And I'm using the Freedom Journal now to get there. And this is, again, my third Freedom Journal, and about, which will end up being about 350 days, give or take. So it's for a lot of different niches, a lot of different opportunities and goals to be set and accomplished. I'm using the Freedom Journal for the full spectrum.
That's awesome. Well, I love that idea of like it not just being for one thing. You do it and then you find another thing and then you go and do that thing. So that's really neat that it can apply to everything. It's not just a business, but fitness, personal, everything. I mean, we all need some direction with those goals. So that sounds really exciting. And can't wait to actually see it in the physical form. So I want to end with one last question that I did not prepare you for ahead of time.
Love it.
So, but I like to hear kind of like what people have to say in the spur of the moment. But I like to end with asking, what is inspiring you this week? Whether that's like something super fancy or something super simple, like what you're watching on Netflix. What is inspiring you, John Lee Dumas, this week?
10,000 steps a day. I committed to this recently with the Freedom Journal. And this week I have hit 10,000 steps every single day, getting out in the sun, breathing in the fresh air. And that's a 90-minute walk. That's not a quick walk. You're out there. It's a big break from work and you're out there, and it's a long time. It's a lot of steps to take. And the day that I didn't do it yesterday, I was like, ugh, I missed that. I needed that. And so it's inspiring me. It's getting me fired up. I'm committed to doing it every single day. When I mess up like yesterday, I think I only hit 4,000 steps yesterday. A lot of reasons for it, as we all have a lot of reasons for everything in our life. I'm committed. I love that. I'm inspired by it.
Well, John, thank you so much. I've really been inspired just talking to you and getting fired up. And those are all, I feel like kind of, cliched saying that because you're the Fire Nation entrepreneur on fire. But really, it's great talking to you. And there's a reason, I know you chose your name, but that fits you so well. It's just, it really does. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Well, speaking of names, you got to be impressed that I've been successfully calling you Kirsten, rhymes with Bierston, all episode.
You have. I've been so impressed. I wasn't sure if you got the email. And my name,
I wanted to sneak it.
You did awesome. Yeah, people call me all kinds of stuff. That's what most people in my life call me, Kiki. And that's on social media. I'm Kiki most places because it's just, everyone butchers it and then they feel bad. And I'm like, it's all right. It's just part of life. So thank you so much for taking that little personal touch. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
So John did not disappoint either in pronouncing my name. Kirsten rhymes with Bierston. I send that out in an email now to people so they know. But I loved getting to talk with him and learned so much just even in that short space. And I hope that you did as well, whether you are listening as someone who is working on your platform, if you're working on writing, or you're trying to work up to a goal, you may want to check out the Freedom Journal because that seems like a really great focused way to tackle a goal. So I want to leave you with this question this week. What is inspiring you? I always ask my guests and I don't ask my listeners often enough. So head over to the show notes, creativewriting.com/034 for episode 34. So you can let me know what's inspiring you this week. And also check out the show notes with some links to the free podcast course, the Freedom Journal, and more of some of the interviews that have been my favorite. listening to John over the past year or so since I actually started listening to podcasts, because it's only been a year, coming up on my year podcast anniversary. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you again to Jasmine Commerce of JasmineCommerceMusic.com for the music for the show. I am glad to be here, and I'm glad that you are here listening. And I just hope that you have an inspired